Welcome to Rome. This is The Bittersweet Life with Katy Sewell and Tiffany Parks. Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katy Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Tiffany in Rome, Katy in Seattle. Here we are in January. And January, if you're me, means that you go on your annual sister trip. Sisterfest is what we call it. I have two older sisters. I don't have nearly the amount of sisters that Tiffany has, which is coming in at a whopping, 5?
Well, I mean, now 4, unfortunately, because we lost my sister Tia, but only one full-blooded sister that I actually grew up with in the house. My oldest 4 are half-sisters, so.
Right. So one full, 4 half. And I have 2 full, both older than me. Sarah and Dana, who have appeared on this show multiple times. So every year, Sisterfest goes to a different location and does a different thing. If you've listened to this show since the very beginning, you've heard about some of those adventures that we've done in the past. One thing I probably haven't mentioned on the show is that for years, they have been asking me to go on a cruise for Sisterfest, like on a big ship cruise.
Like a real cruise, not like a river cruise.
Yeah, not like a we're on a
cruise
ferry
to
boat.
Alaska, like a private boat up to Alaska. A real cruise.
A real cruise, like we're talking Carnival Cruise Line, like the full thing. Water slides
deal.
on the top, basically a floating hotel, or a city, however you want to think about it.
Really.
A floating city. And I have staunchly refused to do it. I have allowed them to make me go to Vegas, which I also don't love. But no, I have staunchly refused to go on a cruise. This year, 2025, we were trying to come up with an idea of what Sisterfest was going to be this year. And let me tell you, the price on this one cruise they found was right. Like, it was so affordable. And at first I said, no, we have to come up with something else. And they're like, you don't even know. Like, you've never even been on one. Let's just do it this year. It's a great price. It's leaving from Long Beach, California, so it's easy for everyone to get there. You know, it's a short cruise. You know, it wasn't like a week way down into Mexico. It was basically a 4-night thing, and I agreed. Now, before I kind of lay out what I want us to talk about, you know, many of the reasons I object to cruises is many of the reasons that other people object to cruises, especially if you do a show like ours where you're constantly hearing about the tourism impact of the cruise ships or, the environmental impact of the cruise ships. We've talked about on the show how cruise ships coming into Venice were actually raising the water level and causing enough water displacement to cause destruction. So then they were like, the cruise ships can't park this close to Venice. Or we've heard from I believe it was Linda, our friend who runs the Beehive Hostel in Rome, who said, like, part of the problem with the cruise ship is that, and I could be wrong, that Linda, if it's not you, sorry, but part of the problem with a cruise ship is that people they are giving to the local economy to a certain degree, but they're not
very small degree.
Yeah, but they're not because they're not staying overnight. They're oftentimes trying not to eat on land because they get free food on board. And as a result, a lot of what crops up around where cruise ship parks are people who are selling tchotchkes that say Mazatlan or something. And, so that you can say, I went to Mazatlan or I went to Venice, when really you spent a few hours in Venice. And so it's not supporting the deeper aspects of a place. That's another common complaint that you hear. Anyway, so I did look it up because we're like, well, environmental impact wise, we also know that flying is not the best thing to do. Flying, I do want to kind of get into a little bit about how humans are like a walking contradiction, because we here on this show love travel, definitely appreciate the value of travel, and yet we know that like having thousands and thousands of planes zipping across the sky and the globe every day is bad for the environment. I did look it up, the environmental impact of a cruise ship versus a flight, and it did say that at least according to the most recent figures I could find, that the carbon dioxide output is worse than flying. Per person, per passenger, is worse on a cruise ship than it is on a plane. And that a cruise cruise ship sitting in port, that its exhaust emissions in that city where it's docked would be equivalent to 12,000 automobiles every single day of it just sitting there running. Then there's like the noise and air pollution, the oil spills, the reports of sewage dumping, all that stuff. And the belief that cruise ships are ruining the world with over-tourism. And I guess my objection to doing it was largely based on all of those things. And, the fact that if you've listened to the show for a long time, I took a very small boat, a 1965 touring yacht, to Alaska twice. And, that experience was like the boat's right in the water. The creatures are right beside you. You're in this very quiet, nature-filled separation from the world feeling.
How many of you were there, by the way? How many passengers?
12. And that
12.
includes the crew.
That includes the crew. So not 12 passengers.
Yeah, 12 people total. At least on
12 people total.
I did it twice. The most recent one, it was 12. I can't remember what number it was prior to that. I think it was a little more the other time.
But if it was 12, you've got to have, at least 4 crew members?
Oh, yeah.
Right? I would think at least 4 crew members. So you were 8, the 8 of you. Compare that to how many people are on a cruise?
Over 4,000.
4,000. I was trying to be like, is it going to be 800 or is it going to be 8,000? And I'm thinking, can't be 8,000.
Well, on the one we went on,
is so many.
Yeah, on the one we went on, it was over 4,000, and there were over 1,200 staff members.
Wow.
So it is basically the size of a small city.
It is.
Yeah, and so when I was on that little boat with 12 of us, we would occasionally see a cruise ship passing or in the distance, and it seemed like an absolute abomination. You're like, here we are out in the middle of nature. Why is a skyscraper going past us right now? All of that said, and yet, I come from a journalistic background. Generally speaking in life, I try to go into things with an open mind. I try to not go into things just from a place of judgment because I think if you approach things with judgment, you miss a lot that's going on. You're too in your own camp to experience what else is happening.
It's easy to be hypocritical.
Yes, very much so. I think we're all hypocrites to a certain degree. You can hate flying. You can be like, you know what? I love the environment so much, I'm never flying again. The minute somebody you love desperately calls you and says that you need to be there tomorrow, you're on the plane the next day, you're on that night. So we all have our reasons why we will do things, even if they go against our values. But anyway, so I went in with an open mind. And then I was like, okay, I know all the reasons why people don't like cruise ships. I'm going to lean into the full experience. I'm on a cruise now. I'm here. I paid my money. I'm a part of I'm one of the 4,000, 5,000 people. And I have to say, there were a lot of things about it that I really liked, and I kind of get why people like it. Here, one of the things that I just loved in general was, the general mix of people, at least on our boat. I've heard that it depends on what line you're on, what the mix is of people. But ours was like a jumble of all ages, all races, all backgrounds. It was a complete mix. It wasn't like, everyone's older, everyone's younger. It was a full-on mix of if you're standing in a hall, you're going to be next to as many 60-year-olds as you are 20-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 45-year-olds. It was like a full-on mix of ages and backgrounds. And given that the United States is such a divided country right now, it just washed all of that away. Now you're just human beings. It was like being at a camp, It was like a week at camp. Human beings, your sole purpose there is to have a good time with your friends, with your family, with your sisters, whoever you came with. It kind of takes away all of these barriers and ideologies, and it's just a bunch of people wanting to have a good time. And then it was also strange because you'd think with a boat of 4,000 people, how could you ever know anybody? And yet you keep encountering the same people over and over and over and over again. I think that's one of the weird things that I guess made it feel like camp. you just keep encountering the same human beings. And so you do like end up making connections, and not just with staff members, but with other people who are on the boat, like other passengers. You might have a conversation with one of them at some point and you never see them again. Other person, you have a small conversation with them and you see them all over the place, That was unexpected to me. And then, of course, there is also, at least for me and my sisters, like how many times in your life, and this is why people often say that the problem with cruise ships is it's about the life on the boat and not the life off the boat. That's one of the main complaints that you hear about the cruise industry is like, these people aren't necessarily wanting to go see where they're going. It's about what's happening on the boat itself. And that was certainly true with the cruise we were on. The cruise went to like basically nowhere. One day we were just sailing in squares, like out in the ocean. It was called a day at sea. I mean, we were basically doing nothing except moving in a circle, and then we went to Ensenada, Mexico, because I guess the cruise was required to do an international port. I mean, half the boat didn't get off to see what was happening in Ensenada, Mexico, because even the crew was like, it's not my favorite Mexican city. My sister had been on this particular cruise before, and she had gotten off to explore Ensenada, Mexico, and she was like, there's really just not much to see. In that case, it's basically a port, it's basically somewhere for the cruise ship to dock itself. And a lot of people felt like it wasn't worth going on shore. But I mean, at the other hand, how many times are you hanging out with your family or your siblings or your friends where it's like you go out for dinner and then you take in a trivia contest and you go see a comedian, then you go to a live music show and then you go out dancing? Like, none of us live that life. And yet on a cruise ship, that's one night. One night.
Yeah.
And
I can see it.
At a fundamental level, that's fun to like do that many activities with your family.
Katy popping in real quick to take you on a little journey for a moment. Back to when Tiffany and I were exploring the streets of Rome. Take a listen.
Coincidentally, as luck would have it, we have one of Rome's very best cafes just around the corner. So let's see if it's open.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Cafe Sant'Eustachio in the piazza of the same name. And I mean, of course, there's going to be some like super niche coffee snobs who are going to have their own particular favorite. But I would say the majority of Romans consider either this cafe or Tazza d'Oro to be the best coffee in Rome. But I do think the smell of this place is amazing. And when you walk inside, if you like the smell of coffee, it's pretty incredible. Now, you can see everybody's standing up at the counter. I mean, there are some tables outside for the tourists, but the Italians who come here, a lot of business people come here during the day on their coffee break. The parliament is just around the corner, so sometimes you'll see some famous Italian politicians in here. They always stand up at the bar to get their coffee. And as you can see, it's packed. Like, you can't really, it's hard to get up to the front of the line. You have to elbow your way up there. But despite its fame, the coffee is very well priced. An espresso is around €1, so they have not taken advantage of their fame. Pay for what you want and then take your receipt up to the bar. And I mean, obviously don't push in front of people. You wait your turn, but people in Italy don't really make organized lines. So you just kind of look around you, see who is there before you, and when you feel like those people have been served, you put your arm forward and you get your coffee.
If I want to be legit, do I have to stand at the bar?
No. Sometimes you want to sit down and have your coffee. There's nothing wrong with that. I prefer that. I mean, I'm a tea drinker, so of course I prefer sitting down. Worse than having a pot of tea standing up at the bar of a cafe. It's like, it's the worst. You know, you don't drink tea quickly. Tea is a slow, it's a total nightmare. So I usually just get water these days.
The one way you are at odds with this country. Well, let's move on to a place where you're not at odds, a place that is extremely beautiful. And another
We have had so much fun exploring this historic city. So many wonderful stories, so many beautiful and thrilling sights to see. And we've made so many discoveries together. Now imagine being on the streets of Rome with us, making those discoveries for yourself, as we show you some of Rome's most delightful secrets. You see them with your own eyes. You smell the smells. We're leading a week in Rome this October, 2025, from the 5th to the 11th. A small group of adventurous and curious listeners.
and you could be one of them. Find out more information at thebittersweetlife.net or email us for the details at bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com. Now, back to the show.
I have a friend named Natalie who actually has been a guest on this show. She was my roommate. She was doing an internship in Rome for the year. I think she was 19. And she went on, she's very smart, very, very talented, and went on to become and is a journalist working for the BBC, and, is going all over the world, and was in Ukraine when bombs were falling, and she's seen it all, done it all. She's been everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
When she was a young person, and I don't know, maybe even still today, her grandparents liked to take her and her brother and her parents on cruises. That was their thing. Like, they loved cruising, and they had the money to take their kids and their grandkids, and that's what they wanted to do. And so pretty much every year they went on a big cruise.
Mm-hmm.
Not like a 4-day cruise, like a 10-day cruise.
Right.
And they always chose some like different location. So, maybe one year it was the fjords in Norway, and the next year it was Southeast Asia, and all different places, the Hawaiian Islands, the Greek islands. And, she is a very serious person in many respects. Like, she is a serious traveler. She goes to countries and she'll live there for 3 months or a year, or she's not a superficial person at all. She's not the typical person you would think like, oh yeah, 3 hours in Rome, sure, that's fine. But on the other hand, she loves the cruises. Uh-huh. And we had a similar conversation to this. And I'm like, I get it, it's your grandparents, it's time to be with family. I understand that. But like, man, the cruise, and she's like, you don't get it. It's all about the ship. It's about the ship. It's not about where you go. And this is coming from someone who adores travel and is a serious traveler. So like you're saying, two things can be true at once, and you can take a person who is an extremely explorative and deep traveler who wants to deeply get to know a place, and you can put them on a cruise ship and they can have a great time. So she would agree with you that it's about the ship.
Yeah.
It's about what's going on that ship.
You've never been on a cruise, right?
So, I have.
Okay,
I have,
you have. I didn't even know. Okay.
Oh, yes. But I was 10. So I was taken on a cruise when I was 10. But let me tell you, I remember it in such detail. I'm not going to say it's the best vacation I ever went on, or even the best vacation I ever went on as a child, but it was very memorable. I remember a lot of different aspects of the trip. I remember what our cabin looked like. I remember the things that I wore to dinner. This was the 80s. I mean, it was the very, very late 80s, but it was the 80s. And I don't know how cruises are now, because this was the one and only cruise I've ever been on. But in the late 80s, you dressed for dinner. You dressed up for dinner. And there were even like you dressed up every night, but there were formal nights when you dressed to the nines. And I had like a taffeta gown that I wore, and I had a little handbag. It was 10. And my mom got dressed to the nines, and we lived it up. And I met a couple of girls on the ship, and we were fast friends, and we did everything together. And there was a hot tub on the very top, and I remember how, because it was at the top, it was so wavy, and there was a cinema, and we played bingo, and I won bingo. I won $450.
Well,
bingo.
It doesn't sound all that different than today. I mean, they did have the same thing where you had one night that was particularly formal, where the whole boat was dressed up, which was probably the most fun night of the whole thing. I mean, there were a couple things. One, there was a cruise director, which just is a mind-baffling job to me, where they are basically the person who comes on in the morning and is doing the morning announcements, but they're also basically, at least on Carnival, they're responsible for you having a good time. They are considered the most fun person on board, I guess.
Wow.
I guess that's how you get that job. They're the most fun, and then they have a group of other fun people around them called like the fun crew or something that also try to get the fun going. But I'll tell you, ours was a guy named Joey. And if Joey was around, like if Joey was at an event, he could be dancing around the bar in the center of the ship, or he could be like leading a game show in the theater, whatever he's doing, wherever he is, that's where people are having the most fun. And I'm just like, who in the world is this guy? Like, he can pass the responsibility off to somebody else, one of his fun crew, and that person can, like, run a game show, but that person's not going to be half as fun, and that game show's not going to be half as fun. If Joey enters the room, it's like the crowd goes crazy. And, I mean, I'm not kidding you. I, of course, got some audio of this, which I could insert, but we had one night, this formal night. I was the only one to witness this because my sisters were off doing something else, and I wandered away because I heard the crowd screaming and yelling, and I was like, I'm going to go find out what's happening over there. What was happening over there? It was Joey, of course. Joey was dancing around on the bar. He's getting everybody singing, all generations, all races, all backgrounds. They're all like singing songs together, which, by the way, also music, the general unifier, I feel. After watching a cruise ship, if people all know the same song, it just brings everybody together. So he's leading them in something. I walk into it. During the whole, I forget what song that they were singing. I don't remember. But during it all, someone actually got on their knee and started proposing to another person. And he just stopped the show. Just stop the show. He's like, hold on. Are we seriously doing this right now? You know, and so he jumps off the bar. He hands the mic to this guy. He says, will you marry me? The woman says, yes. Joey says, they said yes, and makes it into an even bigger party. I do have the audio from after the fact, so I'll play some of it right here. But the thing that was the most delightful about watching it all was because I was standing on a balcony up above looking down on everything, was there was a little girl, just like Tiffany, dressed up in her fancy taffeta gown, on formal night. She just happens to be standing right next to this couple when the guy goes in to propose, and the woman says yes. This little girl just bursts into tears. It was so cute. You know, she just overwhelmed by the joy and majesty of it all, I guess. I don't know, but that was like the mood of the whole thing. But another thing I wanted to point out was it's also the crew, and I had heard that forever. The crew's from all over the world. You know, you and I have done a lot of traveling. I remember from when I used to visit Vietnam all the time, oftentimes if I met someone who really spoke English well and who wasn't, you know, not low income, high income, but like kind of moderate, like what we would consider the lower middle class, almost always they had worked on a cruise ship at some point in their lives. And that's why their English was as good as it was. And the whole staff is like completely worldwide. And I think that their whole existence in life is just also fascinating, at least to me. We would get in conversations with them and, you know, they would be assigned to a particular boat for 9 months. And then at 9 months, they get to go home to go see the family that they've been away from, their country that they've been away from for the last 9 months. They have a certain break. One woman said the break was only 6 weeks long. Like, can you imagine being gone for 9 months and then having 6 weeks off and then you have to deploy to another ship again? Anyway, so they get this break to go home and then they get reassigned to a new boat. So it's like you're also working with the same people for 6 to 9 months. And then you go home, which you're super excited about, but it's also so bittersweet because you've also been working with these people for the last 6 to 9 months. You know, so presumably some of these people are your friends. They're the people you've been spending all of your life with, and you have a roommate, so you've been living with one of them this whole time.
It's kind of like being in the Navy almost.
Yeah, and then you get sent to a different area, and you might get to be like, oh, well, I've been stuck going to Ensenada, Mexico for the last 9 months, and now I get to go to the Caribbean. You know, that's cool. But I just thought, gosh, what a roller coaster ride to to have that be your lifestyle, to like have it be so stable and then so changeable also.
Well, we could reach out to one of my close friends who has been a cruise director.
Wow.
But
is it
yes,
Joey?
It's not Joey. It's my friend Ryan.
Oh,
And
okay.
he was a cruise director on Viking cruises, which they do river, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, people listening, but I believe it's river cruises in Europe. It's like high end. It's not a tiny boat like the cruising yacht that you went on, but it's still nothing compared to the Carnival cruises. It's like a river boat that goes up the Rhine or on the Rhone or the Loire. But he had basically that job. But I think that it's a different atmosphere when it's a smaller boat. I'm sure they do have entertainment. I know they have entertainment, but I don't think it's like the riotous, like YMCA party sort of atmosphere. I think it's a little bit more subdued. But I know that he did that job for a very finite amount of time. Like he did it for maybe a year or two. And he was like, okay, basta. Like I can't do this anymore. It's exhausting.
I mean, I believe
it's
it.
absolutely exhausting.
I believe it. I'd see Joey like the night before at like 1 a.m. And then, first thing 8 a.m., he's like, hello, travelers, like on the thing. I'm like, I told my sister at one point, I'm like, I really hope he has that mic next to his bed so he can just like roll over and be like, hello, travelers, good morning. Today we dock at Ensenada, But
I'll see if Ryan will talk to us. Maybe we can hear from him, like what it was like.
yeah, I mean, because I was fascinated by what it would be like to be a crew member on one of those boats. And I know it has perks, like if your room and board are paid for, you store up a lot of money to bring home, but also like having to be away from home for so long all the time. Some of the people I talked to had little kids, like little tiny kids. They hadn't seen their little kid for 9 months. I mean, that would be so hard, so heartbreaking. I do have to say, though, as a final thought, I love that the crew, though, is that diverse because I think there are a lot of people who all they do is cruise and they never, I don't know, go anywhere, I guess, if it's just about the boat. They're going places, but if it's about the boat, you're mostly on the boat, right? But it is a way to be exposed to so many different cultures. And I met so many different people who worked on the boat that were from Zimbabwe. And I met people who were from other places too. But the unifying factor of all the Zimbabwe people is like, if you said, you're from Zimbabwe, if you mentioned where they were from, they would immediately say something about like how it's the most beautiful country, how you have to like see this, see that. They can't wait to get back there. And all of them went on and on about Zimbabwe so much. I was like, I guess I got to put it on my list. I mean, this seems to be a unifying thing. Every single one of them is like, oh, it's the most beautiful country. I can't wait to get home. The wildlife, the waterfalls. I'd never really considered going to Zimbabwe before. And now I'm like, all right, I'm writing Zimbabwe down on my list because it's got rave reviews, like across the entire cruise ship. Rave reviews.
From the locals, no less.
Exactly. Anyway, so... all right. Well, so am I a convert? I don't know.
Here's a question. Would you go on a cruise again? And if so, what would be the conditions to get you back on a cruise ship?
Well, it was very fun to be on it with my sisters. I will say that. I think that if you have the right people with you, even if you're kind of against the notion of it, you're probably going to have a good time. If you enter it with an open mind and try to not think about the environmental degradation and impacts. Really hard trying not to think about it. I mean, my sisters really want to do this.
First condition is people.
My sisters really want to do this again with my parents. And now that I've been on a cruise, I understand the reason why entire families do it, because they are very good at dealing with people with mobility issues. Like the cruise ship is basically built for people with any kind of ability to have a good time. And so that's why you can do all ages from, age 4 to 95, or 106, like if my grandmother was there. They can all be on the ship and get around without too much problem. And there's going to be different things to do that cater to different kinds of people. So I totally understand the idea of my sisters wanting us all to do a cruise together so that not everybody has to hang out all the time and we can have a family reunion where not like a few people end up cooking the entire time. I totally get that. So they might be able to convince me. They've wanted to go on a cruise with my parents and like the grandkids and all that for a long time. I could get behind it more now than I could before. Am I going to end up cruising every year? I think my environmental belovedness couldn't get behind that. I don't think. And quite honestly, I missed like that feeling of like, if you're going to be on the water, being really on the water, you know?
Yeah.
Because
you're too far away from it.
You're so far up in the sky above the water. You can see the water, but you're kind of squinting. You're like, what is that in the water? Is that a seal? Is it a dolphin? Like, I can't quite, there's something moving around out there, you know? But you're not like right on top of it. And so I definitely prefer that also.
Yeah. The only place that I would really be tempted to take a cruise is, I think, Norway. That's the place that attracts me. The idea of cruising up the coast of Norway and seeing, you know, just the fjords and the glaciers and just this countryside that would be so difficult to see in any other way unless you were on a private boat. It's really impossible to see. So I think that if I had the opportunity, I would do that. I would probably do that.
Resolution for 2026?
No, it's not a resolution, but it's something that I'm not a cruise person, but I would break that. Not that that's a hard and fast rule or anything, that I'm not a cruise person, but it's just not something that would naturally choose, you know, oh, let's go on a cruise this year. It wouldn't pop into my head, but I would do it to go there.
I mean, general takeaway, I think, is I guess a reminder to me, approach things with an open mind. You can have your opinions about it, but don't always lead with your opinions, because you really do miss so much. And if you don't follow us on Instagram yet, Tiffany, my sisters and I spent the entire formal night running from they had a whole bunch of professional photographers set up all over the ship. And of course, we were not planning to buy any pictures. We were just like, let's go crazy posing just for fun, and did all sorts of funny, weird posing. Definitely laughed really hard. One of my sisters was laughing so hard at one point that the photographer actually walked away for a while and sat down so that she could get it back together, because they kept making us stand in like order of age with our hands on each other's shoulders, which is just so it's reminiscent of childhood. Ridiculous. But anyway, I have a bunch of those pictures. So if you don't follow us on Instagram yet, you might consider it, because I'll share them with you, Tiffany, and you can post some of these great photos that we took on the formal night.
I can't wait to see. Yeah, if you don't follow us on Instagram yet, what are you waiting for?
Yes.
Because we got a whole new Instagram strategy going on there. Lots of new posts. I'm actually doing reels for the first time in my natural life. And
or unnatural life, whatever the case may be.
We could use some more eyes on the stuff that we're doing and get some feedback from you guys if you like it. So join us on Instagram if you're not already.
Yes, look for us at the Bittersweet Life podcast. You can also find us on Facebook in that same realm. All right, well, we'll leave it there. Let us know what you think about cruising. I would be interested to know. I had no interest in it prior, and now I'm interested to know. So, you know, that's that open mind again. You can always send us an email, bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com. And we'll leave it there. And until next time, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katy Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Join us again. Bye. Don't miss your chance to explore the Rome most tourists never get to see by coming to Rome with us. This October 5th to the 11th, 2025. We'll take you through the history, art, and stories of Rome in a way that you will never forget. Visit thebittersweetlife.net for more information, or email us at bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com.